now, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time!
So everyone, welcome back to the channel Merely on Time. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Chris and I unbox and review budget watches. And on the channel today is the first watch versus watch battle for the channel. I unboxed this Casio chronograph during the holiday season, and I highlighted one particular reason during that video why I'm not keeping this watch and why I will be giving it away. I want to do just a quick review on it, the things I like and the things that I didn't like about the watch. And over the holiday season, I got a gift card for Walmart, and I bought myself one of the watches, the model of watches that really got me into loving watches, the Timex Ironman. I got one when I was in grade 6 or grade 7. I absolutely loved the watch, and I wore a Timex Ironman for a lot of years, and it's really what kind of made me fall in love with watches for sure. And so I thought, let's do kind of a comparison between the two. They both cost me about $60 Canadian, and they're both just beater watches, if you will. They're both made out of resin and plastic and whatnot. And so I thought, let's just do a kind of a comparison between the two and see which one, in my opinion, is the better watch. And so with that, let's turn the camera around and look at these watches together. Okay, you can see we have the watches that we are looking at today, and before we get into them, I am wearing the Timex Expedition Scout model, a beautiful field watch for I believe it was about $75 when I bought this. Absolutely love this thing, and I am rocking it on the Pagani Design Bond NATO that I got with a Pagani watch. And right off the top, guys, I'm going to have to admit my bias for Timex as we go into this watch battle in just a moment. And so I am very well aware of my bias, and I'm just letting you know I've definitely got a bias for Timex. So hopefully it won't affect the outcome of this watch versus watch battle, at least too much. But there you go, I'm admitting my bias ahead of time. So the first watch we're going to talk about is this Casio, and it is model number MCW 100H. MCW 100H. As you can see, it's a 3-hand analog watch with a 30-minute chronograph. So let's just deal with the specifications on this one. We have a case width of 49.5 millimeters. Now that's measuring from the 9 to the end of the crown at the 3 o'clock. You have a thickness of 13.5 millimeters. Your lugs, and I'm going to explain this, are 16 millimeters and 25.5 millimeters. And your lug-to-lug length is 62 millimeters. And that lug-to-lug length is factoring in the band, and I measured from about where it has this first dip in the bracelet to those ends, squeezed in a little bit, 62 millimeters. So this wears very, very big. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The lugs, as I mentioned, are 16 millimeters and 25.5 millimeters. And so if you wanted to switch this out, you could foreseeably get a 16 millimeter wide band, because that's what that distance in there for the spring bars is, 16 millimeters, and it measures 25.5 as it integrates into the resin case here. Now Adrian at Somewhere in Time Watch Reviews had mentioned that you can get some sort of adapters that you can put in a NATO strap if you want. Adrian, maybe if you want to leave a comment and let people know down below in the comments where exactly you can get those and what they are. He did mention though that they would be potentially the same cost as the watch. This watch I bought for around $60 Canadian. I will leave a link in the description below where you can pick this up on Amazon. Now I want to talk about the things that I like about this watch and the things that I kind of don't like about this watch one major kind of grievance with it, as you would have seen in the unboxing if you checked it out. First of all, I love the look and feel of this watch. I just love orange and black. I love the dial. I love the great big 12, 3, 6, and 9, and the really bold batons that are spread throughout the rest of the dial. You have a nice minute track printed on the rehaut, and the accent of orange off of the printing here, 100 meters of water resistance chronograph, the seconds hand, and all of the subdials have orange on them. It just really pops. And it looks really awesome on the wrist. Basically, when I buy a watch, I buy it because, first of all, it looks good. It just attracts me to it. And as I was scrolling through Amazon, I saw this one. And for the price, I believe it was around, I'm going to say $60 taxes in, give or take a few dollars. And that's Canadian. I just couldn't resist. And it is, of course, just what I would call a daily beater. It is all plastic. The band is plastic. The case is resonant plastic. It is a mineral crystal covering that dial. The buckle and keeper on this one is plastic as well. And so, you know, it's just great for a daily beater. It does have a chronograph at the 9 o'clock subdial. It is a 30-minute chronograph. You engage the chronograph by pushing the top button, and you'll see the seconds hand for the chronograph starting to run at the 6 o'clock there. And then obviously it will time for 30 minutes and then stop, or you can stop it by pushing that button again, and you can see it's just got a slow reset on it. So let me talk about the things that I wasn't really happy with. The main thing that I'm not happy with, and I think where this is going to be, I called it a conundrum in some of the comments on my unboxing video, was it's just not very comfortable to wear on the wrist. There isn't really any flex in this band at all, and these grooves on the bracelet, when you wear it on the wrist, for my 7.5-inch wrist, you just felt it all the time. It was kind of nagging, and it wasn't the most comfortable to wear because of these ends just kind of digging into the wrist, because there's really no spread, you know, to make it a little more comfortable. Now that said, it looks great on the wrist, but it just wasn't that comfortable, and so that was just kind of my major thing. It nagged me all day long. I could feel it on the wrist every time I moved my hand around, and I think when you're wearing a watch, you just partly don't want to even know that it's there. It should be comfortable, and this one certainly wasn't. The other problem is the size. Now, because it's not comfortable for sure 7.5 to 8-inch wrists or above, it's just not going to be comfortable. Where it starts to get comfortable, perhaps at a 7-inch wrist or below, because of the sheer size with the 62 millimeter lug to lug and the essentially 50 millimeter wide width. Once you start to get to a point where it's comfortable to wear, it is too big. So it is a sizable piece. Also, wasn't a huge fan of these pushers in the chronograph. They're just springy, and which is fine, but you can't really, there's no distinct click to tell when the chronograph is actually engaged or not engaged. And so that was just kind of another thing. And the other thing that I wasn't a huge fan of was this crown and the crown guards. And so you can see from the top, there's just no way you're going to be able to engage the crown. Those crown guards protrude above the crown and almost beyond the crown. And so you have to get up underneath with a fingernail. And even when you get it popped out to change the time, it's just, you almost just have to use your finger underneath. It's just, and to set the time, it's just not very practical, just because of the way it's set up. So those are the kind of the turn-offs for me. The pushers not executed well, the crown not executed well, and the bracelet just not comfortable. The band, I should say, just not comfortable on my large wrist. And then the downside being, if it was on a smaller wrist, it may look a little bit too big and swallow a smaller wrist. Those are my beefs with that one. So let's take a look at this Timex real quick. So let's take a moment to talk about this Timex. I'm not going to do a full review of it. We're not going to show you all the modes that it has or anything like that. They are very, very similar in their construction. Obviously, this is a resin case as well. It does have a look like it might have like a low lead brass like some Timexes, but this is just resin or plastic. Has a mineral crystal covering the dial, just plastic or rubber band on this one. So in that regard, they're very similar. Where they differ a little bit is in their size, and so the specs for this one, you have a case diameter of 40.5 millimeters. Now that is measuring in between those pushers where the 9 and the 3 o'clock would be if it were analog. From the Indiglo pusher at the top right to the mode pusher on the bottom left, you have a measurement of 47 millimeters. It is also 13.5 millimeters thick. The lugs on this one, it's the same way as on the Casio. On the underside of the watch, you have 18 millimeters, and you have spring bars that you can remove. And at the face of the watch, it will be 24 millimeters as it integrates into the resin watch head. And the lug to lug on this one is 60 millimeters. And so again, factoring in just kind of where it bends down, where it just kind of has that slit in the band is kind of where I measured that lug to lug. And you can see in here, this is where you have an 18 millimeter lug width, and the band again, 25 millimeters, I think it was. Let's just have a quick look again. 24 millimeters as it integrates into the resin case there. So this one also looks great on the wrist. They both do. But let's get into the discussion of what I think is the better watch and why. Okay, and as Bruce Buffer says, it's time. It's time to get into just a comparison of these watches and what one I think is the better watch of the two. A couple of things to note that aren't worth really comparing. Obviously, the build quality of these is very similar with respect to the fact that they're both resin. They both have mineral glass covering their dials. The price is the same. The packaging is the same. There's a lot of similarities between these two watches, and so I tried to think of some categories that would kind of help differentiate between the two. And the first category that we're going to talk about is the looks and aesthetics of the watches. Which is more appealing? Which has more eye candy? Which watch would you be more drawn to? And I'd like to hear you chime off in the comments for each of these categories what one you think wins. But for me, the most appealing watch of these two is this Casio. I mean, it just looks fantastic. I love the orange off of the black, the accents on the seconds hand, and the subdials all with that orange accent on their hands as well. And just the boldness of the dial with the 12, 3, 6, and 9, big and bold, those bold indices. It just looks awesome. I mean, comparing it to this Timex, appeal-wise, the Timex, let's just say it's pretty bland, black and silver, a little bit of orange accents with the branding of Timex and the Iron Man branding on the sides of the band, but really it's just kind of a bland looking watch. It's not something that's going to scream at you, buy me, or anything like that. In fact, when I was purchasing the watch at the Walmart store, there were quite a few other Timexes that I almost bought instead of this one. But when I saw this one, I wanted to buy just because I knew I was going to be talking about this Casio. So Casio definitely wins on the looks and aesthetics, in my opinion. So let's talk functionality. Now, obviously, the Timex has more functions on it and more modes. So I'm really going to be talking about how the watches compare with respect to the functions that they do have. Obviously, the Casio only has a chronograph function, and so I'm just going to base the two on the functions that they have and how well they work. So let's talk legibility. I think they basically tie in that regard. The analog watch on the Casio is very legible with how bold the indices are and the hour and the minute hand. There's no problem reading it, and obviously with the Timex, it's a digital and it is very, very legible, and so they kind of get a tie on that. And so where it loses points, where this Casio loses points, and why Timex is going to win in the functionality department. is for the crown issue for sure. And the Timex, I think, wins because the pushers on this Timex are much nicer and better than the pushers on the Casio. The Timex, the pushers are more tactile, and then you have the beep function, which can be turned on or off, but you know when the button has been engaged because you hear the beep. You can see all the modes that this one has. Again, these pushers are just spongy, and when you push it in, sometimes I just pushed it, and sometimes you just can't tell when the watch chronograph has been engaged. And so just because of those couple of things with this Casio, I think the Timex for functionality is the better watch for sure. We'll talk quality or fit and finish. You know, again, they are basically resin and plastic, but the Timex, I think, wins out for a couple of reasons. The first of which is the buckle and tang. The buckle and tang on the Casio is just plastic, whereas on the Timex you get a better quality buckle and tang. It is a low lead brass. Looks like it's bead blasted, and it's definitely giving me way more confidence than this plastic buckle and tang on the Casio. I actually wonder how long this thing will last before it breaks, and so the Timex squeaks by because of that. I also want to say that the band on the Timex, the comfort of this obviously we've talked about, but the band on the Timex watch is softer, feels better, and less hard than the plastic that is on the Casio. And so I will say that the band on the Timex definitely feels better, and therefore for the the quality, the fit and finish feel of the watch, I'm going to give the Timex the nod on that one. Wearability, the Timex wins this one by a mile. As I mentioned, they both have very similar band widths underneath. But because this is softer, the Timex band is softer, and it doesn't have these ridges on the band that kind of dig into your wrist. The Timex, you don't even feel it on your wrist. It is honestly just so comfortable. The Casio, you feel it every time you move your hand, and so because of that, the Timex wins that one by a mile. I mean, it's just really, really comfortable. Fits nicely and comfortably on the wrist, whereas the Casio does not. And lastly, special features of the watches. Well, hate to say it, but the loom is non-existent on the Casio. They both have 100 meters of water resistance. They both function well with the functions that they have, but as far as special features are concerned, the Timex wins it out because of Indiglow. So when you're wearing this at night, you will never have a problem telling the time because of the Indiglow function. And so for those reasons, I think this Timex watch is a far better watch to buy than this Casio watch is. And so, yes, I know I'm a Timex fanboy and maybe my bias got in the way, but I think in comparing these two watches, the Timex actually wins. So what do you guys think? Did I get it right? Is this Timex watch better than this Casio watch? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There are other categories that I could have chosen to compare the two watches. Let me know if you think I missed something. I think one for sure is the desirability of the brand. I think the Casio wins out in that category over a Timex. I think Casio, generally speaking, is a more desirable brand than Timex is. But even if I had factored that in, this Timex is better than this Casio. Maybe there's a better Casio watch to compare to this Timex digital watch. Perhaps a Casio digital watch that's $60 and under Canadian. If you know of one, let me know and I'll get it into the channel perhaps and compare it to this Timex. The Timex has a timer on it, a 30-lap chronograph, has 3 different alarms, and it has occasional reminders that you can set for paying bills or anniversaries or birthdays and whatnot. There's a lot of functions on this Timex Ironman for $60. I'd be interested in knowing a comparable Casio digital around 60 bucks that could be compared to this Timex. So let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks so much for supporting the channel. I have a great giveaway lined up at 750 subscribers. I am, as of the filming of this, 39 subscribers away from reaching that mark. And so if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And thank you very much for that. As always, guys, remember, whenever you leave your house, you need to have a great looking piece to wear on your wrist, like this Casio or like this Timex. And wherever you're going, you need to get there on time. Thanks so much. God bless. We'll see you in the next one.